One look at his face and you know you're dealing with a top-level psychopath. The long scars, the strange tattoos, and that scowl. No wonder Nikko Jenkins' image went viral. But what's crazier than his courtroom photo or the horrendous crimes he committed is the reasons he gave for his depraved acts. He had been commanded to do it by a snake god called Adophis. We can give him a bit of slack because we've all tried to blame ancient Egyptian deities for our misgivings at least once. But not all of us have pretended to be insane to avoid death row. Unless he wasn't pretending, in which case the justice system has a lot of explaining to do because Jenkins only had the opportunity to murder innocent bystanders because he was let out of prison early. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe a man as bonkers as Nikko Jenkins was destined to kill one way or another. Either way, lock your doors and windows because this isn't the first time he was put behind bars. Born in Omaha, Nebraska, it should come as no surprise that Jenkins did not have a happy family life. Police knew of his family well, including parents David and Lori, and regarded them as hellraisers going back generations. Jenkins was just another child in a long line of family crimes such as drug abuse, domestic violence, and child neglect. Amazingly, family members and extended family have been involved in over 150 criminal cases, with 20 children being removed from homes. That means this is one family tree that is rotten to the core. Yet so many of these cases ended in acquittals or mistrials or dropped altogether. And with allegations of witness tampering on the rap sheet, it seems fair to assume that the Jenkins clan knew how to game the system as much as they knew how to break it. In all, the Jenkins name has been convicted of a staggering 633 crimes since 1979, making it one of the more unique family traditions. Needless to say, big family reunions are probably wiretapped. For young Nikko, he first got a taste of the long arm of the law at just 7 years old. Other kids were bringing toys to school, but Nikko brought a gun. A few years later, at 11 years old, he was removed from his group home placement after repeated acts of violence against everyone around him. You might be thinking that this proves he was evil incarnate, but it's worth remembering this was the behavior he witnessed between his own parents. That's why what he did at the age of 13 is just logical progression. 13 years old, this time Nikko put down his fists and picked up a knife. By 17, he was committing armed carjackings, which is how, in 2003, he finally went to prison. Would you be surprised to hear he committed crimes in jail too? 2009 saw him land a conviction for assaulting a prison guard, adding 5 more years to his sentence. This happened during a furlough for his grandmother's funeral, meaning he ruined a golden opportunity to prove good behavior. Yet, the extra years were not tacked on to the end of his sentence. Thanks to sentencing laws, they were made concurrent, meaning they were served alongside his current jail time. In effect, that meant he served no additional time for ruining Granny's big goodbye, and proved to Nikko that despite his long history with handcuffs, things ultimately went his way. That hunch must have been proven true when, somehow, he was released early in 2013, despite having more red flags than a game of Microsoft Minesweeper. It was here that things got really ugly. Just 2 weeks later, bodies were found. 26-year-old Juan Uribe Peña and 29-year-old Jorge Cajiga Ruiz were shot in the head. Their bodies were found slumped in a pickup truck near a swimming pool, with Juan getting another bullet in his groin. Their pockets had been turned inside out, a telltale sign of a robbery and a telltale sign of Jenkins' scattershot thinking. He didn't know these men, and this opportunistic murder wasn't financially beneficial. It only garnered police attention. Not to be deterred by the trail he was leaving, Jenkins would kill again in just 8 days. This time, it was someone he knew. It was someone he met in prison. 23-year-old Curtis Bradford had been shot twice in the back, with his body found on a street corner. Yet Curtis could not have known a passing acquaintance would kill him, given that they both posed together in a Facebook photo the day before. There's a lot of talk of how to improve your selfie game, like which lighting source to use and how to stand, but surely a top tip is never get a snap with a violent criminal who looks like a supervillain. But even with a close tie to this third body, Jenkins would evade capture for some time. By now, cops had been mounting evidence, but they still did not have Jenkins in their sights. Unfortunately, they would not be able to put the pieces together in time to save the life of Andrea Kruger. The 33-year-old mother and wife would be found 2 days later with multiple bullet holes, and her SUV would be discovered abandoned 12 miles away in what was a feeble attempt to set it on fire. She had been returning from a bar shift, and the vehicle, it was deduced, had been carjacked and discarded. But the connections to what would be seen as a spree killing would not be made until one of Nikko's ex-girlfriends called the cops for an unrelated matter. You see, Nikko had been threatening to kill her and her family and send her demonic forces. But perhaps that was just their love language. So when she saw him get a weapon from his cousin, she knew she had to call the cops. Cops brought in the 26-year-old ex-con on terrorism charges, but soon found evidence connecting him to their recent homicides, including surveillance footage proving his own mother had brought him ammunition for his gun. She's now doing her own prison time. Like mother, like son, it would seem. But what was an even bigger surprise for the cops was the rambling 8-hour confession they got from Jenkins the moment they turned on the video recorder during their interrogation. As the cops put the evidence to him, it became clear that Nikko had no way out. He tried to wriggle free by detailing his history of psychiatric help and unloading his backstory of childhood trauma, but it went nowhere. Then, in a desperate move, he tried to act insane. In a letter to a newspaper, Nikko wrote his Adophis theory for the world to see and claimed that law enforcement were fully aware of the influence from this ancient Egyptian god. Jenkins even tried to sue the state for $24.5 million for, quote, emotional stress and pain, which is arguably crazier than invoking a forgotten god of a forgotten religion. He argued that it was the state's fault for releasing him early without mental health treatment. In his court filings, he even blamed the correction officials for the 4 murders, but the cops weren't falling for it. Mental health experts were brought in to assess whether or not Jenkins was as nuts as he seemed. After all, he certainly had the childhood brushes with the law to mount a credible case. But it wasn't credible enough. The experts decided that he was fit to stand trial, though no doubt those face tattoos gave them pause for thought. It was ruled that the cold-blooded killer's claim of divine influence was a simple case of liar, liar, pants on fire. Despite Jenkins presenting himself in court, even going so far as to speak in tongues, they threw the book at him. He was found guilty of all 4 murders and slapped with a 450-year sentence, which would be hard to serve given he also got the death penalty. But even this overkill wasn't the end. In one final Nikko move, whilst awaiting sentences in fail, he carved 666 into his forehead. However, he performed his self-mutilation in a mirror, making his scary face much funnier now than it was before. Speaking of being more funny than scary, he drank his own urine, snorted his own dried semen, and tried to carve his penis into a snake. Just a normal day for Nikko Jenkins. But the big question is whether he was failed by the state or born evil. Was his IQ level of 69 a sign that he needed support or proof that he was beyond help? Whatever your opinion, let us know in the comments below. If you'd like us to cover more stories like this, then please leave a like to help the algorithm and share this with a fan of psychopathic stories. As always, hit subscribe to get our next video, and be sure to watch your back.